Hi, I'm Jim. Have you ever felt abandoned inside a relationship? The more you love, the more they withdraw. The more honest you are, the more silent they become. If that sounds familiar, then this video isn't just for you, it's the gift you owe to yourself. Today, we're unpacking a truth most people misunderstand. Avoidants aren't heartless. They're trapped in an ego protection system they've built for years. They don't leave because you did something wrong. They leave because they never learned how to stay. And here's the twist: your response determines whether they ever come back. In this video, you'll learn why avoidants panic when intimacy grows, how your non-pursuit triggers their sense of real loss, and how to tell the difference between a genuine return and an ego-driven comeback. This isn't a trick to get someone back. It's a roadmap to get yourself back your confidence, peace, and self-respect after cycles that have slowly eroded them. If you've ever wondered, am I still worthy if I stop trying? The answer is yes, more than ever. Watch this video until the end. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss insights that help you love without abandoning yourself. The healing starts with clarity, and today, you don't have to walk it alone. Avoidantly attached people are not heartless. They are capable of love, but the way they love is distorted by a deep-rooted belief. If I let someone in, I will get hurt. Their ego is built like a fortress, impressive, self-sufficient, and isolated. Inside that fortress, they tell themselves they are strong, independent, and above all, emotionally untouchable. It sounds admirable in a world that glorifies independence, but in truth, it's a psychological survival strategy shaped by early wounds, betrayal, or abandonment. They don't acknowledge attachment as a natural human need. Instead, they treat love and intimacy as luxuries, nice if they happen, but completely optional. For them, relationships are not spaces for healing. They are risky arenas, and they always keep one foot out the door, just in case. This is why they keep their distance close enough to keep you hoping, but far enough so you never truly reach them. They are masters of appearing independent, rational, and emotionally above it all. They are often admired for their self-control, intellect, and the impression that they never need anyone. But beneath that exterior lies a primal fear of dependence, fear of being seen in their vulnerability, and worst of all, fear of being hurt by someone they let in. So they avoid. They love from a distance, on their own terms, and withdraw the moment you begin needing them back. This creates the classic push-pull cycle. They advance when you withdraw, and retreat when you come close. Every time they pull away and you chase, their avoidance strategy feels validated. See, I'm fine alone. They are the one who needs me. The more you try, the more inflated their ego becomes. But not just you, they are also trapped in this exhausting cycle they can't escape from. Their ego needs to stay intact, so they don't have to touch that core fear inside. But here's the truth. It's not your job to break their ego so they open up. That's not love, that's unconscious self-sacrifice. What you can do is stop chasing. It is your silence, your grounded stillness, not begging or proving, that forces them to confront their own reflection. And precisely because that ego is so fragile beneath its solid appearance, avoidants are constantly trying to stay in control before emotions get too real. When the distance they carefully maintain begins to shrink when you get closer, when you ask for clarity, consistency, or express a desire for deeper connection, their internal alarm system goes off. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've come too close to a territory they don't know how to handle. This is when they activate their deactivation strategy. This strategy isn't always obvious. It doesn't always look like a sudden breakup or ghosting, though it can. More often, it's subtle and insidious. They grow cold, distracted, distant. Conversations that once flowed now stall. Gestures of intimacy suddenly get brushed off. They might create unnecessary conflict or start highlighting incompatibilities as a way to rationalize stepping back. All of this isn't meant to hurt you. It's meant to protect them from the emotional closeness they don't feel equipped to handle. Deep down, intimacy doesn't feel safe to them the way you might assume. In fact, it threatens the core belief system they rely on to survive, that they don't need anyone, that they can always leave, and that dependence is dangerous. When they sense you stepping into that inner territory, where their old wounds still live, their instinct is to disconnect, confuse, or disappear. Not because you're too much, but because the connection is getting too close. Their deactivation strategy also serves another core purpose: maintaining control. By creating distance first, they always get to be the one leaving, therefore, avoiding the feeling of being abandoned or hurt. In the inner world of an avoidant, initiating distance is a silent victory. I'm still fine. I never got too attached. Every time they pull back and you chase, their belief is confirmed. Love is dangerous, and avoidance equals safety. Tragically, the more effort you make to pull them closer, the further they retreat. Not because they don't care, but because your pursuit unintentionally affirms all their distorted beliefs. That you need them more than they need you, and that you won't leave even if they give you nothing in return. They're not the villain, but they are trapped in an outdated emotional operating system where closeness equals a loss of control and risk of pain. So here's what you need to remember. Their deactivation is not a reflection of your worth. It's not a response to you being too needy, too emotional, or too intense. It's their defense mechanism against something unresolved inside them, something they aren't yet ready to face. And your continued effort to prove your love only pushes them further into avoidance. The solution isn't to change yourself, but to recognize there are limits you can't cross on someone else's behalf. And it's precisely at this point, when the avoidant starts to pull away, that a different defense mechanism often activates in the other person, the anxious attachment style. While the avoidant needs distance to feel safe, the anxious partner needs closeness to feel loved. This is where the heartbreak begins, not because there's no love, but because each person is trying to manage the fear of abandonment in opposite ways. When the avoidant withdraws, the anxious partner reacts instinctively. They chase. They text more, asking, "Are you okay? Are we still good? Did I do something wrong?" They try to fix it, even when they don't know what's broken. They begin to shrink themselves, sacrifice their own needs just to keep the other person from leaving. They think that if they become more patient, more understanding, more easygoing, the avoidant will soften and return. But what they don't realize is, every time they chase, they're strengthening the avoidant's distorted belief system. The avoidant doesn't see the pursuit as love. It feels like confirmation of their ego-protective narrative. I'm the one with value. I'm the one being needed. I can stay distant and still receive love. In their eyes, you're not an equal partner. You're someone willing to carry the emotional weight they refuse to hold. And that, even unconsciously, creates a dangerous power imbalance. Because now, the relationship is no longer two people meeting each other in mutual effort. It becomes a game of emotional tag-on running, the other chasing. One goes silent to gain control, the other over-communicates to fill the void. One disconnects to test power, the other connects desperately out of fear of loss. The more the anxious partner tries to pull the avoidant close, the more they lose themselves in the process. And this is the most dangerous trap. Anxious partners often don't realize they are abandoning themselves to hold on to someone who keeps slipping away. They turn love into labor. Affection becomes a negotiation. They live in waiting, in prolonged silences, in nervous hope every time a notification pops up. Their joy becomes tied to another person's presence or absence. And little by little, they lose the one thing avoidants never compromise on: boundaries. Chasing doesn't make the avoidant realize your worth. It only convinces them they can come and go as they please, and you'll still be standing there. The tragic part, they're not doing this out of cruelty. They genuinely believe you've chosen to stay. They've never seen you walk away, so they don't believe you will. To break this cycle, the anxious partner doesn't need to love less, they need to love differently. Love is not about clinging. Love is knowing you deserve connection that doesn't require you to chase it. And the shift begins with one quiet, powerful decision. Stop trying to prove your worth to someone who refuses to see it. And it's precisely in that moment when you finally stop trying to prove yourself, stop chasing, stop rescuing a relationship that only you have been holding together, that something inside the avoidant partner begins to shift. What they were once certain of, that you would never leave, that you would always return, suddenly becomes uncertain. For the first time, the script they relied on no longer works. And with that, a cognitive dissonance begins to unfold. When you no longer react in familiar ways, no texts, no explanations, no soothing messages or invitations to talk, you force them to face the very void they've always avoided. The real consequence of their withdrawal. They're no longer receiving ego-affirming validation through your pursuit. And with that supply gone, they begin to wonder, did I just lose something truly valuable? This doesn't happen overnight. At first, the avoidant feels confused and out of control. They question why their usual strategy no longer works. And like anyone who senses they're losing control, they start issuing subtle tests to re-establish their power. They might send a vague message, a neutral emoji, or suddenly become visible on social media again. It's not because they genuinely want to reconnect, it's because they want to see if you're still there. If they still have you. If you respond, if you answer, explain, or show hope, you reset the old cycle, reinforce their ego, and bring everything back to square one. But if you stay grounded in your calm silence, if you don't get pulled into the emotional bait, they're forced into the next phase of ego disruption. In this phase, the avoidant begins to feel the very emotions they've spent years trying to avoid: emptiness, loss, and a true desire for connection. There's no longer anyone chasing, no longer anyone validating their worth without effort. They begin to question the very strategy they believed was bulletproof. And strangely enough, your silence begins to echo louder than any words could. This is not a moment to retaliate or manipulate. It's the moment where your steadiness and boundaries speak volumes. You're no longer a passive player in the push-pull game. You've become the observer, the one who doesn't react, and in doing so, you hold up a mirror that forces them to confront themselves. If they return, it won't be from a place of superiority, but from a place of vulnerability. I messed up. I miss you. I'm not so sure anymore. But that doesn't mean you rush back into their arms. Because their ego hasn't been destroyed, it's only been destabilized. If you immediately return to old patterns, giving, soothing, tolerating, you'll help them rebuild their walls. But if you remain steady, keep your healthy distance, and require clarity, you are laying the foundation for something new where only those who are truly ready to step out of old strategies can reach you. And if you remain steady, if you hold your boundaries, instead of spiraling back into old emotional loops, what happens next goes beyond mere cognitive dissonance. You trigger a controlled collapse of the avoidance ego structure. This is a deeply uncomfortable yet potentially healing turning point. When their usual tactics no longer yield results, when their silence is no longer answered with pleading or reassurance, they're forced to confront the emptiness they've spent their lives avoiding. Without external validation, they begin to feel real emotional pain, not caused by you, but by the emotional isolation they've built around themselves. They may not express it outwardly at first, but internally, something begins to crack. They no longer feel above it. They no longer believe they're just fine on their own. And this is where the real need for connection, the one they've always denied, begins to rise to the surface. If they return during this phase, the energy is completely different from previous ego-driven comebacks. This time, they're not re-entering to test or manipulate or regain power. They're coming back from a different place, the vulnerable place they've long refused to acknowledge, where they can finally admit they miss you, that your absence matters. And that connection isn't a luxury, it's a real need. In this stage, you may see them begin to open up about things they once avoided: honest emotions, hidden fears, even apologies. They might talk about the sense of loss, admit they were wrong to withdraw instead of communicate, and show real effort to do things differently. These are signs that they're not just coming back to you, they're slowly coming back to themselves. But this shift is still fragile. The old ego doesn't disappear overnight. It's only been shaken, not eliminated. If you respond too quickly, too generously, or drop your boundaries again just to welcome them back, you might unknowingly help them rebuild their old defenses. In that case, the avoidant no longer needs to try. They assume you were just temporarily upset, and the cycle restarts. So when they return in a state of vulnerability, you don't need to shut down, but you must open carefully. Listen, but don't blindly believe words. Watch their behavior, ask questions, require clarity. True vulnerability always comes with accountability for their emotions and for the pain they caused you. If they are willing to walk into that space, you can consider giving the relationship a new beginning. But if they return only to feel valued again, without taking responsibility, you must be strong enough not to repeat the past. You're not going back because you need them. You're evaluating whether they've grown enough to step into a real relationship where no one has to run, no one has to chase, and both people can stand still, look each other in the eyes, and not be afraid. But this is where you need to be more clear-headed than ever. The avoidance return, no matter how tender or emotionally open it seems, is not always rooted in a genuine desire for connection. The line between a true return and an ego-driven comeback is razor thin. And if you're not paying close attention, a few sweet words can pull you right back into the old cycle. That's why it's essential to learn how to differentiate between a return based on ego and one based on real attachment need. When an avoidant returns from ego, you'll notice they want to restore intimacy quickly, but avoid talking about what really happened. They may deflect responsibility, downplay the pain they caused, or try to rush back into closeness as if nothing ever broke. They make promises but offer no concrete action to show change. Instead of remorse, what you're witnessing is a scramble to reclaim control, to confirm they're still wanted, still in power. But if they return from genuine attachment need, you'll feel a very different energy. They won't avoid the hard conversations. They'll acknowledge their role, validate your pain, and won't pressure you to forgive or reconnect on demand. They understand that trust isn't restored through words, it's earned through consistent, changed behavior over time. They may move slowly, they may be awkward, but you'll sense real effort. No pushing, no demands, just someone trying to love without running away. And this is where your role becomes critical. Because regardless of why they're returning, you decide whether the old script is repeated or a new chapter begins. If you fall back into old patterns, accepting too quickly, overgiving, compromising without standards, then, even if they're sincerely trying, their growth has no room to take root. Relationships are ecosystems. If one person reverts to an old role, the other gets pulled back with them. You have to be the one who holds clear boundaries, not as punishment, but because you understand that love cannot survive in blindness. You can't love someone so deeply that you forget how to love yourself. Watch behavior, not just word. Let them show you they're different, instead of telling you what they've realized. And most importantly, stay grounded in your independence and self-respect, because that is what earns long-term respect, not your endless patience or self-sacrifice. You deserve a love that isn't based on whether you're good enough to be chosen, but on two people who choose each other daily with presence, responsibility, and reciprocity. And if they can't meet you there, then letting go is not a loss, it's a declaration of self-worth. In the end, what matters most isn't whether the avoidant comes back. It's this: how you come back to yourself. Real growth doesn't come from trying to change someone, it comes from choosing yourself. Even if that choice requires letting go. Maybe they'll return, maybe they won't. But the deeper truth is, you're no longer losing yourself in the waiting. You don't have to chase anyone to prove that you're worthy of love. Real love doesn't ask you to be easier, less emotional, or so independent it hurts. Real love is a space where you get to be fully yourself and still be met, where connection isn't carried by one person alone, but held in mutual care, effort, and presence. If you're in a limbo relationship or have just stepped out of a painful, avoidant, anxious cycle, let this be your reminder: you are enough. Even if they never return, even if they never see your value, you are still enough. And when you stop chasing those who aren't ready, you make space for those who are people who show up, take responsibility, and meet you in maturity and reciprocity. Subscribe if this journey has resonated with you. Stay close to yourself, because from that place, everything else begins.